Would you like me to seduce you?
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, he walks into mine.
Why is the rum always gone?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
It's a trap.
Every town has an Elm Street. Trust no one, Mr. Miller. Nice night for a walk. Groovy.
Hey guys, welcome to the Celluloid Fiends podcast. We really appreciate you listening, and you know what? We would also really appreciate if you went to the iTunes Store, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts, and go ahead and subscribe, leave us a rating, leave us a review. You can also check us out at Celluloid Fiends on Facebook and Twitter. And you can follow me at Mitchell C. Long on Twitter and Instagram. And you can read my writing on film, TV, and more at cupofmo.com. Tonight, as always, I am joined by my wonderful co-host.
What up, Celluloid Fiends? This is Gabriel Orto. If you want to go ahead and give us a like on Facebook, that would be great.
And we have a special guest in the studio who has joined us before.
Hey, Celluloid Fiends, it's Wes Clifton.
And if you didn't hear the review that Wes and I did of Revenge of the Ninja, I highly recommend checking it out. It was a good episode.
It's a good time.
And you can't see Wes right now, but what are you wearing right now, Wes?
I got my Canon Films hat on again because I guess you brought me back for this one because it's another Canon movie.
I was kind of expecting you to say khakis.
Oh, yeah, I do have khakis. I'm also wearing khakis. I came straight from work.
So tonight we are actually talking about another Canon movie, and we are discussing Lifeforce. And this movie came out in 1985, and it was directed by Tobe Hooper, as well as written by Dan O'Bannon. It's based on the 1976 Colin Wilson novel The Space Vampires.
Space Vampires!
And that kind of gives the plot away a little bit during the opening credits. It had a budget of $25 million, and I was actually surprised. It only made $11.6 million at the box office.
Yeah, it was a pretty big flop for them.
Yeah, but obviously since then it has had a resurgence on home video, including a bunch of different Blu-ray releases. So if you haven't seen this movie, it is about the joint American and British space shuttle the Churchill, which embarks on a mission to explore Halley's Comet. And in the coma of the comet, they find the 150-mile-long alien spacecraft. And on board, they discover a bunch of dead bats and 3 naked humanoids, 1 female and 2 male. They recover the humanoids, but on their return mission to Earth, the Churchill goes missing and is later discovered completely charred except for the intact bodies of the humanoids. Later on, Colonel Tom Carlson of the Churchill lands in the ship's escape pod in Texas and is whisked to London, where he recounts the events which transpired aboard the Churchill and aids in a hunt for the missing female alien vampire. So I picked this movie. I watched it for the first time a while back at the Retro Film Series, which all 3 of us are huge fans of. You can check that out at the Carolina Theater in Durham. Highly recommend it.
It's one of the best things to do in the Triangle, man.
Absolutely. I would even say it is the best thing to do in the Triangle.
Rules, man. It's one of my favorite places to be.
It's a rad thing. Check it out at carolinatheater.org. So this was both of y'all's first time watching Lifeforce.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it was.
And Gabe, I guess that doesn't really surprise me too much. Like, I knew you would love this movie. But, Wes, I'm surprised you hadn't encountered this before, just because it's a Canon film, and I know how much you love Canon movies.
Yeah, I know. Like, and we talked about that a little bit last time I was on. Like, I don't know. I had heard about this movie. I'd first heard about it in the Electric Boogaloo Canon Films documentary. And, I don't know. They made it seem like it was just, like... I was expecting a real train wreck, the way they made it seem like in the Canon Films doc.
And Gabe, had you even heard of this movie before?
I've heard of it because of Retro, but I'd never seen a trailer for it. I had never heard anything really about it. I just heard the name, and it's like Lifeforce is playing.
Here's a question I have for both of you. Did seeing that it was based on the book Space Vampires during the opening credits, it'll spoil the film for you?
No, I knew what it was about because of the documentary. Yeah.
A little bit, but I didn't know necessarily what to expect. So I knew it was about some kind of vampire that came from space, but other than that, I didn't know how they were going to act, how they were going to look. Because I went into this totally blind, no trailers, no anything.
Yeah, that's how it was for me too. I did, of course, know, just because I saw in the opening credits, okay, space vampires, they're going to be vampires. Clearly, these humanoids are going to be vampires at some point. But even with that, I wouldn't say that it spoiled it, because this movie, let's be honest, it is batshit.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah. I'm honestly surprised that it didn't fare better at the box office, just because it's really unique. I know if I went to see this back in the day, I would have told all my friends to go see it. I think one of the most unique things to me is the way that it genre hops so much. Mm-hmm. And it sort of begins as a straightforward sci-fi film and almost looks like Alien at the beginning, and then it kind of turns into a gothic vampire movie, and then turns into sort of a supernatural mystery, and then it goes full zombie film at the end. So what did you guys think of the genre hopping? Did you like that? Did you think it was kind of jarring?
I think it could be jarring at points, but this movie can be kind of jarring at some points. Like, just the basic concept of it, especially with the practical effects they had, were quite animated.
Oh, yes. What did you think of the genre hopping?
I mean, I thought it was cool, but I mean, I make no secrets about the fact that I'm really into like things that are kind of ridiculous and a little bit over the top. I mean, last time I was on, I mentioned Ninja 3: The Domination, which does quite a bit of crazy genre. This wasn't like that. This didn't come off quite as cheesy. I thought it was cool, man. It kept you on your toes, and like, it brought together a lot of influences. Things that I think were in the zeitgeist at the time, but also just things that the filmmakers wanted to do. So I thought that was pretty neat. Like, they were just kind of borrowing, like you said, you gave it a pretty good description there, man. Like the sci-fi, the gothic elements, the zombie stuff. I mean, you're right. At the end, it was just a straight up zombie movie.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said, Gabe, about the practical effects. And if I recall correctly, the guy in charge of effects was John Dykstra, and he was actually an Academy Award winner. And there are a few elements like that from the film, like how well the special effects are. Like, I think they're better than a lot of modern CG. And also the score, which seem kind of almost out of place, because there's clearly a lot of budget put into the score, which was by Harry Mancini with the London Philharmonic. And then it's this kind of schlocky story going on.
The music is great.
Oh, yeah.
The music's great.
It's pretty epic.
You mentioned, what'd you say, John Dykstra? Is that what you said? So is he the guy from Star Trek The Motion Picture? So as I was watching this, I was thinking, like, the two movies that kept popping into my head, well, there were several that it reminded me of, but at first, like you said, it definitely had an Alien feel to it. And then I kept thinking, like, not really the story or anything, obviously, but just kind of some of the ambiance of the movie felt kind of like Star Trek The Motion Picture. So then today, actually, just to kind of, because I watched this a couple days ago and it was my first watch, so I was trying to kind of get it back in my brain, and I was watching the trailers, and one of the trailers said, from the writer of Alien, the special effects creator of Star Trek The Motion Picture. So I was surprised by that. I was like, okay, well, this all is coming together, why it felt like that.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
So what influences did you see in it, Gabe?
I definitely saw Alien. I'm trying to think. I saw a little bit of, like, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Like, Alien's the big one that's sticking out to me.
Yeah, I mostly saw Alien, and then I was reminded just a bunch of 70s and even early 80s horror films like The Manitou or The Changeling, mostly because of how quickly all of the characters just sort of accept the most outlandish possibility. And one of my one moment I can think of is when there's I can't remember the character's name off the top of my head, but when he kills a vampire, and he mentions that he did it the old way, and just pulls out like a fucking, I think like a lead-lined sword.
Oh, it's a stake. It's a stake, but it's like a lead or iron. It's iron. He says specifically.
That's
right?
what
It's
it
an
is.
Iron stake. So he's talking about like the old vampire myths, which I'm assuming he's talking about just like reading Dracula or something. But you're right. Like he doesn't seem. Well, honestly, as I was watching the movie, I guess probably it says when it takes place, right? Does it say that? I just missed it at the first. So I assumed it was set in the near future because nobody seems extremely surprised by finding an alien vessel in Haley's Nobody seems extremely surprised. But when I was watching the behind-the-scenes features, Toby Hooper mentions it's set in 1985. Like
they just kind of accept everything in stride.
Wasn't this movie made in 1989?
It was 85.
Yeah, 85. And so it's set the year it is released. I was surprised by that.
Yeah. At no point is there any surprise.
It had the feel of like a in the near future kind of thing.
Like maybe a few years in the future.
Yeah.
But nope, it was supposed to be present day.
You know, another thing that you mentioned a minute ago was the whole gothic vampire movie thing. And it's funny you said it because I was watching some of the behind-the-scenes stuff on the Blu-ray, and Toby Hooper mentions, you know, how excited he was to get to do something, and he says, sort of like one of the old Hammer Dracula movies. He was like, I was really excited to get to do something sort of like one of the old Hammer Dracula movies. So there was definitely that influence in it.
Yeah, I could very much feel that, and I love a lot of the old Hammer Dracula movies as well as Frankenstein films, but I almost wish there were a little bit more of the gothic vampire elements in this movie, because it seems like it's just like a brief period when they're in here, and then it kind of transitions into kind of a mystery. One of my favorite sequences was actually when they go visit the mental institution, and Patrick Stewart just shows up.
Sir Patrick Stewart.
Yeah,
Sir Patrick Stewart.
Just respect.
Yeah. What did you guys think when he showed up?
I saw his name in the credits at the beginning, so I was waiting for him. But I mean, hey, I felt the same way I always do when Sir Patrick Stewart shows up. Very excited.
Patrick Stewart is always a shining light in anything that he's in.
Oh yeah, I kind of like the gothic vampire parts. I kind of wish that Sir Patrick Stewart had been in this a little bit more, and I was surprised at how scant his role was.
Yeah,
Mind you, this is before Star Trek: The Next Generation.
True, but I think he was still pretty well known at the time.
but I don't know. I can't I know he had probably done Excalibur. By that point, it's the only thing I'm thinking of. I'm sure he'd done other stuff too. I mean, obviously, Excalibur's not the only thing he was known for. But honestly, before Next Generation, I don't know a ton about Patrick Stewart.
When did Dune come out?
Prior to Next Generation, I'm pretty sure, right?
It was.
Yeah.
He was also in that. That is not a cinematic masterpiece at all.
You know,
Which they are making a remake of Dune.
oh yeah.
Well, it can't be worse than the original.
Oh, I know.
So maybe I need to go back and rewatch that. I mean, not to get on a tangent. I watched it once and I liked it, Dune, but I don't know.
I haven't watched Dune in about 15 years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
That's
for
something
me.
I got to revisit.
I rented it when I worked at Blockbuster, and I mean, sure, it was free, so I definitely got my money's worth. But like, I was liking it, so I don't know.
I think I rented it from DVD Netflix, and oh boy, yeah, it's like I shouldn't have opened that red envelope. You said not to get on a tangent, but you know what? That's basically what our episodes are.
Sure.
They're long tangents.
I think everybody wants to hear people get on a tangent when they talk about movies.
So would you guys classify this as a cult film?
I would qualify it as something that's on a cult movie in the making, because people are starting to realize how great this movie really is, and they're taking a liking to it. It's not up there yet with some movies, but it's in the beginning of phases where we're gonna start to see a lot more stuff involving this movie. We might even give it a couple years. We might see Cavity Colors put out a T-shirt for it. Who knows? Like that, when you get things like that, that's when I know you're a real cult classic, like a Monster Squad or something like that. But I think it definitely has the recipe for it, and I see a lot more people liking this movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. Like, I think I had obviously, well, like we said, I'd never heard of it until the Electric Boogaloo documentary. But it does have a Shout Factory release. I don't know when that Shout Factory release came out, but it's a pretty cool Blu-ray special edition. So yeah, it's not the kind of thing that everybody's heard of, or you're like, oh yeah, that movie, it's a cult classic. But it has a lot going for it. Like we mentioned, a great score. Honestly, pretty well acted. I thought it had a lot going for it, but yeah, it's not one that's like really in the ethos as much as some of the cult classics. But with that, like the Shout Factory release and like it being mentioned in stuff like the Electric Boogaloo doc, I mean, it probably will get out there.
Yeah, it's getting there, definitely.
The celluloid fiends are talking about it. Surely,
This is going to kickstart its rise to cult
renaissance.
film.
Yeah,
because I agree. I believe this is 100% a cult caliber film, but I don't think it's reached that status yet. I think it's on the way with a bunch of those different Shout Factory releases, including a really cool steelbook. But yeah, it just hasn't quite made it there yet. So kind of getting back to the different movements that this film has throughout, did you guys have a particular segment that you enjoyed the most?
like what comes back to me is the part at the beginning where they were going on the alien vessel. Like, I just think that's cool, all the mystery of it. It was really creepy. I don't know, that whole part to me, I always like the parts when they discover something mysterious, like something outside of their realm of experience, sort of like in Alien when they first they don't know what's going on, they're just landing and they're looking, any of that kind of stuff I like. So that's what really, as much as I hate to go with the very first part of the movie, that's just what really stuck out to me, just this whole like what's happening, what's this thing in the comet, and then they go on the craft, which is creepy looking, the vessel. That's the part that stuck out to me the most.
I always tend to like the moments in movies when everything starts to get a little batshit crazy. And I'm also a big fan of the practical effects. And when they started absorbing life energy and those corpses animated at certain points, I really dug that. I loved the way their eyes looked, the way they exploded. Like, I'm a sucker for crap like that. So that shit like that makes me really happy.
Yeah. That was really well done. I think I'm gonna have to side with Wes a little bit. I loved the opening for a lot of the reasons you said. It was also just incredibly pretty.
Yeah.
I love the kind of phosphorescent green of the comet and the way that it almost looks like they're going through like an artery or something for the spaceship, which kind of makes sense. And then one thing I loved about the spaceship design was just how intentional it was. And then at the end, it opens up and just starts absorbing all of the life force that is being sucked out of people. And I thought that was a really cool shot in the third act.
It was. Like, everything in this movie, I love. I love everything about this movie. There's not a ton I don't like about it.
Yeah.
The story, the acting, the practical effects, even the not so practical effects. Like, I thought it all looked fantastic. It's definitely a beautiful movie. It's like, even without sound, this movie is good fun to look at. And then you add the score, and then you add the acting and the plot line to it, and if not a triple, it's a home run. Honestly.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna ask a dumb question. I guess we're assuming that everyone, before they listen to the episode, has seen the masterpiece that is Lifeforce, so we're gonna delve into spoilers.
Well, we can get into spoilers.
We can get into spoilers.
It doesn't matter if people have seen it.
Yeah, cool.
Listen,
But you should watch it.
This movie came out 33 years ago. Sorry, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
And honestly, the plot is so bonkers.
You could watch it if you knew.
We could give away lots of spoilers, and you still wouldn't know.
Because it's like you just said, Gabe. It's a beautiful movie. You know what I mean? To watch, like it just looks great. It had a lot of great talent behind it, which is what makes me wonder what made it not as successful. And knowing what I know about Canon Films, I have to wonder how much Menachem Golan's business model had to do with the movie not being a huge success. Well known that Menachem Golan is this weird. That's the head of the Canon Group, if people don't know Golan and Globus, But Menachem Golan loved movies, and he loved making movies. He was very passionate about it. But he also just wanted to make lots of movies. So it was a well-known fact that he churned movies out fast. Toby Hooper was talking about how he got this movie, and he said basically, like, He had a meeting with Menachem Golan. Menachem Golan slid the novel Space Vampires across the desk and said, "You will make this movie." And Toby Hooper said he was kind of like, "I don't know, sure, maybe." And he said he read it, and he said within a few days, Cannon Group had worked out all the details, and he was getting ready to start making this movie. He's like, that's just how it was working with the Cannon Group. Like, yeah, okay, we're making this movie, I guess. And so it was just like a quick process. But they did throw a lot more money at this movie than most Cannon films had thrown at them. So, made a lot more.
25 million is enormous, and this even siphons some of the budget from Masters of the Universe.
Breaks my heart. It's one of my favorites.
And I think, Wes, you can even point to the exact scene where this occurs.
Well, so the story goes that at the end of Masters of the Universe, which as a child, I still think it's just a great movie, but I had no idea what was going on. The end of Masters of the Universe, there's this great fight scene between Dolph Lundgren as He-Man and Frank Langella as Skeletor. Amazing as Skeletor in that. And they have this great fight scene, and it's dark, and there's like lightning coming off their swords, and I always just thought it looked great. But the story goes that the reason why that fight scene is in the dark is because Masters of the Universe ran out of money, and the studio shut the lights off on them. Like, I mean, I can't guarantee that's true, but that's what I'm pretty sure that's in the documentary, the Electric Boogaloo documentary, and I've heard it elsewhere as well.
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and say this about Masters of the Universe. I watched this as an adult, and I loved it.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, the set design is phenomenal. The costumes are great. If I recall correctly, the score was really solid.
Yeah, it's good.
And I liked how it was sort of these characters that were out of time and out of place.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it worked well. It had humor in there. It had action.
And Frank Langella, I mean, I know we're on a tangent again, but Frank Langella, it's a masterpiece as Skeletor. Like, it is a great performance. And he always said it was his favorite, at least one of, if not his favorite role he ever did.
That's powerful,
Yeah.
because he's had a very prolific career.
Yeah, but he loved being Skeletor.
Huh.
Sorry, Lifeforce.
Tangents.
We could just make this a movie episode, double feature.
Did you get talking about Canon films and like they all kind of bleed together a little bit? Like it was just this weird phenomenon of Canon films.
It was the cut that would not heal.
Yeah.
This is very true, and you know what? I'm glad you brought that up because I got a question for you. What are your top 5 favorite Canon films?
So we talked about that last time I was on, and I'm afraid I'm going to change up the list because I get caught every time by spur of the moment. I think last time...
I want to ask you again now that you've seen Lifeforce, because I'm curious if it made the cut.
I don't know. Maybe. I liked it a lot. Here's the thing, though, that I noticed after last time. You asked me what my favorite Canon films were, and I definitely forgot that Bloodsport is a Canon film, and I left it off the list, but I love Bloodsport, so it needs to be on there. So let me see. I'm going to say Masters of the Universe has to be on there. It's one of my favorite movies anyway. Bloodsport, Revenge of the Ninja, American Ninja 2. Part of me wants to say Lifeforce just because we're watching it and it's so good. No, I think if I was going to give it to one more, I might give it to Cobra.
Okay. Yeah, my 5 favorites are Lifeforce, American Ninja 2, Masters of the Universe, Cobra, Revenge of the Ninja.
I didn't know what canon was till we watched this movie. So Gabe will not have a list.
Next episode, we're going to ask Gabe that question, and he'll have a list of
Bloodsport is
his
definitely one of my
favorites.
favorite movies regardless.
There it is.
I love Bloodsport. Bloodsport will always be one of my favorite movies.
Preach.
I haven't
Masters
watched
of the
it
Universe is also a movie that I do like. And I like Lifeforce a lot. And as far as the ninja movies goes, I haven't watched them. But I have seen Cobra, and Cobra is also a pretty good movie that
Brown's
I do.
the disease, and he's the cure.
So I didn't know canon was like really a thing that people got into. But if you're selling it to me, guys, I'm all in. I'm down to watch more of these movies.
Sweet. I finally just bought Electric Boogaloo in preparation for this. I was tired of like renting it and trying to find it. I just bought it. I was like, I've watched it so many times at this point. Like, I just need to own it.
Ooh.
So this inspired me to buy Electric Boogaloo, and I would encourage everyone to do the same.
Everyone, buy Electric Boogaloo.
I'm not affiliated with the Canon Group, just a big fan.
This episode brought to you by the Canon Group. Yeah, I haven't seen that, and I actually have a copy of Bloodsport that Wes encouraged me to buy on VHS for $1.
Great value.
Yeah, but I still need to get around to watching that one because I haven't yet. Maybe I'll do that this weekend. With that, we're gonna take a break, and when we come back, we're gonna keep talking about Lifeforce.
Now, going back, you say the ship's tapes were destroyed in the fire.
No, they weren't destroyed in the fire. That's what we were told to tell the public. They were erased.
Erased?
Also, the Churchill's escape pod is missing.
What's that mean? Did someone escape?
We don't know. Unfortunately, the condition of the bodies make an accurate count impossible.
Could the heat from the fire have launched the pod?
No.
What started the fire?
The ship's oxygen system ignited. It was a terribly hot fire.
Yet you say the 3 cases containing the bodies were untouched.
That's correct.
Where were they found?
In the bay where the spacecraft was stored.
Where everything else was charred. Incredible. Is it not? Have you examined the cases?
Using every technique we have. X-ray scans of the cases yield only blurred images.
What does that mean?
They're not precisely physical objects. More like a sort of force field. We're a bit out of our depth here. Yeah, the whole thing is...
Yes, I know. Incredible. Have they done an autopsy yet on the guard? No, I suppose not. What about your 2 other bodies?
Colonel, may I be excused? I seem to be feeling a little more nauseous than I thought.
Yes, of course. I noticed from your door, Dr. Flada, that your area is biochemistry. But I understand your real interest is...
Death, Colonel Kane. Correct. Thanatology is the name for it. Death for you, Colonel, is a bureaucratic problem. Who did it? When? Why did they do it? A problem to be solved, am I correct?
And for you?
Well, I'm fascinated by death itself. What happens as we die, when we die, what happens after we die.
You mean life after death?
Yes.
Is there?
What?
Life after death?
Do you really want to know?
No.
But to answer your question, yes, I think there is. If I'm correct, the life force is conserved always and in all things, even after death.
And you think that applies to what's happened here tonight?
Yes. Yes, I do. I think that girl, creature, drained energy, life force partially from Bukowski and totally from the guard.
A vampire?
It could be described that way, yes. I mean, in a sense, we're all vampires. We drain energy from other life forms. The difference is one of degree. That girl was no girl. She's totally alien to this planet and our life form, and totally dangerous.
Hey guys, we're back and we're talking about Lifeforce as well as Masters of the Universe.
And Bloodsport. And
Space
Cobra.
You know what? This is just a Canon Films retrospective. Buckle in. We're gonna be recording for a few more hours.
They made a lot of movies.
They did. Yeah, that they certainly did. Some of them had very high budgets like Lifeforce. Some of them had no budget. Probably because they used it all for Lifeforce. And so we've talked a little bit about some of the qualities of Lifeforce that we really enjoyed. Was there anything you didn't like about this movie?
You got something?
Feel like the runtime was a bit long. Felt like it could have been maybe 15 minutes shorter. But other than that, I thought this was a pretty standout movie.
Now, we were watching the director's cut, so honestly, there is a theatrical cut that is shorter. I've not seen it, so... I was a little bit confused, and I think this is why I wanted to say, is it cool if we do spoilers? Because I was a little bit confused by the very end of the movie, which being confused about an ending, especially on first-time watch, is not necessarily a bad thing, so I can't say this is a flaw in the movie. Maybe I just missed it, or whatever. I don't know. Is this a time to talk about this?
Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead.
Because maybe you guys can explain to me. So, the main astronaut guy, Like at one point, she explains that the reason why she is a stunner is because she is like his idealized woman, right? She says that at some point, like she doesn't look like that. She looks like the bat creature, but she formed her appearance from his mind. But then as she talks to him more and more, he says like, she chose me. And then she's kind of like, it was always you. And at the end she says, you're like us and you always have been. And I didn't understand what that meant.
Maybe they sent him to Earth at some point.
Maybe.
But I get that I will give you this. There are some things that could have been better explained.
Yeah, like to me that just if she looks like a human because she is his idealized female human, but he has always been like them, I didn't understand.
How did he get his form in the first place?
So I didn't understand that.
It's a whole nother can of worms with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I've seen this a few times, and I really don't know exactly what to make of that. What I interpreted it as is you find out that Carlson was a vampire, and I guess he was on Earth the whole time.
Okay.
But
he had never had to drain life force, or
yeah, that's the part that didn't make sense to me, unless he was doing it unwittingly or something.
Yeah.
But because it would, like, I understand the concept of him having been there, because it does insinuate that the spaceship has been to Earth before. But yeah, I don't know what to make of that line.
But I think maybe that's the only thing that I didn't really like. I mean, everything else was really good. Like we said earlier, the score was amazing. It was well acted. It was well written. I mean, there are a few bits of dialogue here and there that like it seemed a little weird, but it seemed like not super well delivered. But whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's a canon film. They're always going to be those.
That's an insightful criticism on my part. But whatever.
Yeah. You guys keep on talking about these movies like they're so horrible. Like it's Troll 2, all right? It's not...
Oh, no. I thought this movie was great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, this movie was fantastic. There's
really
very little I dislike. I agree with you about Carlson, that line about he's always been like them. It was kind of confusing and not very well fleshed out. And I mean, you could make like a prequel or a sequel delving more into that.
And I will also say this: Mo kind of cleared it up for me when we watched it, but at the end, the ship just kind of floats away. It does. It's not like destroyed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because they wanted a possibility of a sequel. Mo's like, well, the ship's dead. I'm like, they never really said that though.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if they wanted a sequel or they were supposed to imply that it was dead. I just didn't get that. I saw them go up into the ship and then it just kind of like the lights went off and it floated away. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, kind of ambiguous.
Yeah, I did think it was sort of insinuating that the ship was destroyed and was then kind of left derelict and floating in space. Because you see it lit up and then the lights kind of go out and it looks a little wilted as it floats off. So my interpretation was that the ship had sort of been destroyed and was just floating off into space, but lifeless. It was without its life force, you might say.
Mo with the knee slappers.
I'll have to put in a little rim shot or something there.
Oh man.
But yeah, I that one I think is sort of left open to interpretation. But that was at least what I thought. The other thing I'll add is I did feel like Matilda May, who was the female space vampire, I thought she was naked for pretty much most of the movie.
No objections.
And I thought it was at times a little gratuitous.
Go for it.
Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna say. I thought it was at times a little gratuitous. I don't know if it was sexist, because she definitely felt like she was in control the whole movie, and a very empowered space vampire.
We talked about that a little bit earlier, but I felt like I could see that. And obviously, like, yes, we've discussed on the previous time I was on here that canon films, I mean, they did go for some of the more lurid things sometimes to lure in the crowd, whatever. So, I mean, obviously, yes, they could have made the film without her being nude so often. I And it was nude to an extent where, like, you were like, she's been nude quite a bit. It was
she was noticeably nude.
In the pre-HBO era, I mean, that was just not as common. But, like, I thought that what they were doing, as we said earlier, talking about, they did draw a lot on like, vampire lore. We talked about how Tobe Hooper was influenced by, like, the gothic vampire movies, and, you know, even in the movie itself, they reference, you know, being familiar with the vampire lore. So, going back to Stoker, I mean, vampires use their allure with the opposite sex, or even with their own sex, whatever. They use that allure, whether it be a sexual thing or a hypnotism thing, whatever. It's just to bring victims to them. So she was his idealized woman, and that's why, you know, they made such a big thing about that. She was supposed to be the idealized woman, and she used that to lure people to her, and it worked numerous times.
They're supposed to be like the ultimate enchantment, almost. Like Dracula, everything. Like vampires in general are supposed to be they're supposed to be very romantic, suave, good looking, and I guess that's playing off that. All throughout history, except for maybe like Nosferatu, a lot of vampires are portrayed as attractive women and gentlemen.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from the Stoker. You know, he kind of did that whole thing, and because you're talking about Nosferatu, which is like kind of how folklore would have it.
Right.
But starting with Stoker, yeah, like very often they've been portrayed just like you said, like in that very suave, smooth manner. And I think that's what they were playing on with this. I will comment on that the Blu-ray release. Matilda May does about a 10-minute interview. She talks about she didn't even really know if she wanted to be an actress. She had done like a film or two before this, but she didn't really know if she wanted to be an actress. She was a dancer. And also Tobe Hooper in his little interview on there talk about this. They had a very, very hard time casting that role because of the nudity. Like, just people didn't want to be nude that long. He said that he flew in like a whole plane load of actresses from Germany, and while they were on the plane, they unionized and agreed that they weren't going to do the nude scenes. So by the time this whole plane load of actresses show up to audition, they've all agreed that they're not going to do the nude scenes, and the only person who would do it, and obviously that's why she engineered it, was the person that engineered this whole scheme to not do the nude scenes. But he had a really hard time. He said he flew in so many actresses because people didn't want to do the nude scenes. And then Matilda May said, obviously, you know, she felt kind of strange about it, but her agent at the time convinced her to do it, and she, you know, she was very happy. She learned English on the set of the film. So, yeah. Yeah,
because that's something I read about after watching the movie. Is she apparently did not know English very well going into this movie. So I mean, kudos to her. I thought she did a really good job.
Yeah.
In this role, because I think it would have been very possible to sort of have it just be reliant upon kind of the nudity. But I thought she just had a very commanding presence. I thought she delivered her lines really well.
And that's it. I mean, you're at the point of it. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah, it could have very well been a very exploitative nudity. And I mean, to an extent, like I say, she was nude a lot. I mean, that's a thing that gets talked about this movie. And I get the feeling that's why in the Canon documentary, I don't remember exactly, but I get the feeling that's why they kind of said, like, this movie was so strange, because they're pointing out, you know, how much she had to be nude for. But she does have a presence about her that lends her a great deal of agency. So she's not just the naked chick walking around. She is I mean, clearly they talk about her being a naked girl a lot, and she's doing that as out of a sexual appeal to get victims and lure people in, but she has a lot of agency to her. And they commented on the fact, Tobe Hooper commented on the fact that she's a dancer. So, you know, her dialogue is minimal, but her presence and the way she holds herself and moves was perfect for the role, and to project that presence without dialogue.
Which is a way that Vampires and Dracula has been portrayed.
Yeah.
He's always he's a presence in a room.
Yeah.
The way he dresses, the way he looks, the way he presents himself, he always makes an entrance.
Yeah.
And he's always the center of attention.
Yeah, it's cool.
Speaking of vampire movies, Gabe, you got a top 5 list for us?
I can't give any particular order. Blade.
Nice.
Bram Stoker's Dracula. 30 Days of Night. Hammer's Dracula. And what's another one? Forgot the name of it. John Carpenter's Vampires.
Haven't seen that one. Wes?
I know that my number one is Hammer's Horror of Dracula, or just called Hammer's Dracula in England. I love that movie. So Horror of Dracula, hands down. Number 2 for me, I'm going to go the original Nosferatu. I like the remake a lot as well, but I'm going to go the original Nosferatu. Number 3, I'm going to have to go with the original Universal Dracula, Bela Lugosi. Love that movie. When Gabe was talking, I had mine, and then now I'm losing it after those 3. Those are the big 3 for me for vampire movies. I will say I like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie a lot. I never really watched the show. Everybody tells me it's great, but I loved the movie growing up, and I still would say I really like that for a vampire movie. And I need number 5, and I need one to be a little different than the others. I'm trying to think. Oh, Shadow of the Vampire is a good one as well.
I want to throw in an honorable mention to another movie that is just fantastic, and that would be Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Salem's Lot's my favorite Stephen King novel, and I like the movie version too.
I'm going to go with, and this is no particular order, but Blade 2. Lost Boys. I'm surprised neither of you said that one.
We let that one slip.
You're wearing
and
a
I'm wearing a
shirt.
Lost Boys t-shirt. I'm wearing a Lost Boys t-shirt. I didn't say Lost Boys. I'm an it. Ladies and gentlemen, I've really lost it today. Lost Boys is one of the best vampire movies
But
ever
I'm
made.
staring at the shirt and don't say it.
Right.
Oh, that was a great moment right there. Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'm saying Lifeforce. Even though in some ways it doesn't even feel like a vampire movie, which we'll get to in a minute.
Vampires.
And yeah, I might go with a Hammer's Dracula. That was a tough one.
That was on all 3 lists, folks. Take the hint.
Yeah, so even though this movie does deal with vampires who are from space, in some ways it doesn't really feel like a vampire movie because there's no like blood sucking, and I liked that twist. And Gabe, you mentioned this earlier, and I want to get back to it a little bit. The sort of mechanism for taking someone's life force, and you said you like the effects there a lot.
Yeah, it was almost like they were sucking out their aura, you know. And I even liked the fact that when they were in the ship, like they were doing it almost like telekinetically. They were because you could either do it the fast way, which is like sucking it all out, or your presence in a room will just eat at people's life forces. That's why the astronauts started dying, and now that's a reason why I think maybe why he didn't need to get life force that much, because maybe him living among human society, he was just sucking little bits at all points, and then he got into a small room with a lot of people, and maybe it killed them, not because it wasn't just one person doing it. It was all these humanoids doing it, plus him. He was eating their life force too, and that's probably why the astronauts died.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that, because there are several times in the film when they intentionally leave someone alive, so they don't have to drain it all the way. They can drain it somewhat. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that I thought there was some decent world building there. I would be really curious to know how draining someone's life force works more specifically, like if that has to be intentional or if it's just kind of instinct, and if you need to top your life force up.
I think it's almost like breathing, almost like you can do it unintentionally, which is why you can just like walk around, maybe get some off of you, get some off of you. It's kind of like breathing, but like I feel like when they just like suck it straight out, it's kind of like taking like a deep breath. It's like I'm intentionally breathing, you know, like that's how I feel it must be like.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that was a good comparison. I liked your parallel between sucking someone's life force out and breathing. One thing that kind of confused me was just how easy it was to kill the 2 male vampires at the beginning.
Well, no, they survived that. Yeah, they come back later. It was a trick.
Yeah,
and they come back later.
But it seemed like they went down pretty quickly.
You mean even at the end when they get him?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the focus was on Matilda May's vampire most of the time. Yeah.
It was, you'd think they would be a little bit more intelligent.
Yeah.
And they
They're
really
the
weren't.
decoys, because this is what I really think. I really think that she was in charge of the whole operation.
Oh yeah.
And these were henchmen or just sacrifices to the cause, basically.
Yeah. Another thing, I'm gonna nerd out for a second here, but you guys did the D&D movie last time, and what I'm thinking is like the Drow in Dungeons and Dragons like are a matriarchal society. So for all we know, the space vampires are a matriarchal society, and she's like the queen bee. You know what I mean? So maybe that's what we're talking about. I mean, she definitely seemed to be the one who seemed to be in charge of the whole operation. The other guys did seem to be like her henchmen, sort of. I will say the part at the end when the one male vampire straight up turns into the bat creature and he like stakes him was awesome.
That was
really
that
cool.
was phenomenal. The like I loved the effects for the bat. I love that creature design. Yeah, that was one of my favorite scenes.
It was
actually,
cool.
the quick transformation. I wish that shot dwelled on the bat carcass just a little bit more because that was pretty impressive. I loved that part, and actually it got me kind of curious if the bat creatures could mimic pretty much any life form. Is that sort of what was insinuated?
I think that's kind of what was insinuated, because I feel like they were waiting for somebody to stumble across them, but they have to be able to mimic themselves after anything.
Mm-hmm.
To steal anything's life force. I think this is something that their race has been doing for thousands and thousands of years across this universe, different universes. They have to be able to change on a fly.
Yeah, that's the impression I got as well.
Yeah, that was sort of what I assumed, and I almost wish that there had been a scene with one of the vampires mimicking like an animal or something
else,
like
yeah,
that.
just so you would see.
Yeah, because I think that would have just been really cool to take a look at. So why don't we rate this bad boy? Wes, you want to go first as the guest of honor?
Man, yikes! So I've been really struggling. I am not good at rating movies, and I said that last time I was on here. Like I am just such a I get really enthusiastic about movies, and I'm just like everything's 5 stars, yay! I'm not gonna give it 5 stars, obviously, but I really liked it more than I was expecting to. In all honesty, like I liked it more than I was expecting to. As I said, the Electric Boogaloo kind of made me think I was getting ready to see something that was a train wreck, but it was really good. And even just talking about it today has, I think made me appreciate it even more. I kind of want to go back and do another rewatch already. I'm going to go 3.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gabe?
I'm going 3.9 on this one. I think it's almost a 4. I think there's a couple things that detract it from getting up into the 4s and 5s. But I thought, all in all, this is a pretty stand-up movie. Definitely want to make this part of my collection. Maybe I'll go on Shout Factory as soon as I leave here and buy the Steelbook for $22 that Wes let me know about while we were at dinner before making this podcast.
Also not affiliated with Shout Factory, just a fan.
This episode brought to you by Shout Factory. Yeah, I'm gonna give this one a 5. I fucking love this movie. Ooh. It's just purely fun to watch, and when I went into it, especially when I saw Space Vampire based on space vampires, I thought this movie, like you said, Wes, was just going to be a complete and total shit show. But it was fun to watch. It was very well made technically. The score was phenomenal. The effects have aged ridiculously well, and I think even still top a lot of current films. I loved the lighting a lot. There were some really vivid colors, especially at the end with this kind of bright blue, and at the beginning with this phosphorescent green. And I liked the idea of alien vampires. I thought it was executed really well. I like the genre hopping. Yeah, I have very few complaints. I mean, there's some flaws, but I think a lot of the technical prowess kind of helps to compensate for that.
I really want to check out the novel Space Vampires now. I read a little bit about it after this, and so we talked about earlier, I'm a big Lovecraft fan, and apparently the novel is very Lovecraftian. It was supposed to be, not an homage, really, but the guy was really influenced by, Lovecraft's style. And I'm really curious to check out the novel Space Vampires. It sounded interesting. yeah, I'm into that.
Yeah, just watching the movie piqued my interest in it as well.
Celluloid Fiends has been sponsored by Space Vampires.
Space vampires. So hey, another thing that I thought about earlier and I wanted to say, but I couldn't find a good time to squeeze it in, so I'm squeezing it in right now, is just talking about the design. We were talking about like the design and how cool we thought all that stuff was. So Toby Hooper specifically in the extra features talks about the ship, and he talks about how his first idea was just to take something like a gothic, sort of like Dracula's castle, and just put it kind of up there as a spaceship, like floating around space, sort of. And that's kind of... Then he said, they started working with the designs, and he likes what it came out with. He wanted it to stay very gothic looking. But he specifically said, which is funny, because I thought it was sort of reminiscent of Giger, like a little bit.
Yeah.
But he said specifically he didn't want anything to look like Giger, because he had Dan O'Bannon working on this, which, they had just... not long before this, Toby Hooper had been working on Return of the Living Dead and had turned it down for Lifeforce, and so that's why Dan O'Bannon did Return of the Living Dead before he came on to help write this. But since he had Dan O'Bannon writing it, he didn't want it to be like Aliens. He didn't want it to look like Giger, but I kind of thought it still did. But
I agree. I thought it had that vibe, and then I even thought the ship interiors at the beginning totally looked like they were from the Nostromo.
Yeah.
But ultimately it did its own
suits
thing.
and everything.
Yeah.
It was very reminiscent of that.
Apparently, a lot of the crew also worked on 2001.
Oh, that explains a lot too.
Yep, that clears up quite a bit. Yeah, so this is a movie that if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. Even if you have, I think this movie deserves a rewatch. I've seen it, I think 2 or 3 times since watching it in a theater a couple months back, and it just has a lot of replay value.
That's cool.
Yep. That's our show for the night, guys. Thanks for listening. Once again, if you haven't already done so, check us out on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, leave us a rating, leave us a review. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Mitchell C. Long on Twitter and Instagram.
Can I do a plug?
Oh, yeah.
All right, cool. So last time I was on here, I mentioned my writing a little bit. I did just 2 weeks ago have a poem come out in a anthology from Rogue Blades Entertainment. It's an anthology. You can buy it on Amazon.com. It's called Crossbones and Crosses, and it's an anthology of stories about pirates, crusaders, and a mixture of the two. So like one section's about pirates, one section's about crusaders, and one section they mix all together. Rogue Blades Entertainment, like if you're into adventure or fantasy, or really they were kind of known at first for sword and sorcery, which I love, but they just kind of specialize in heroic fiction now. They put out some great stuff, and I'm really pleased to have this poem in Crossbones and Crosses. So it would be awesome if people would pick that up. And like I say, my poem's in there, but there's tons of great stories in there. So
that's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. I appreciate it.
I will definitely pick that up. And all you listeners out there, you should grab a copy as well.
And if you want to hear about my other fiction, you can go to my website. It's just wdclifton.wordpress.com. So.
Storm